Welcome back. It's Sean and I from the Passers with our guest Max today as we're covering the National Online Scholastic Championship. This is the first day of qualifying. Next qualifying will be in 2 weeks. Just want to give a quick shout out to, we had a couple of follows while we were in between rounds via LA Cuz, Agent Ace, and Mr. Lammy. I know, Lammy, we did follow one of the games that requested. Again, if anybody wants us to request a game, you just need to let us either know the ICC handle you were provided, because that has all the information we need. Otherwise, just let us know your section and USCF ID. Next round should be starting shortly. Once it's started, we'll be able to get the games into the interface, and we'll start going from there. So just give it probably a couple more minutes. Last round, it was... Oh, actually, one section's ready, so I will be back getting those games in.
All right. More exciting chess starting right now.
Well, John was just saying that in this round, things are really going to be heating up because now we're really seeing the rankings close in on each other.
Yeah, definitely. Should see some interesting matchups. Definitely.
I've got my eyes on a few names that we've been seeing from the very beginning. We're seeing them yet again in this these top four boards on either section.
Yeah. That is often the case as the gap is bigger at the beginning, and these are the highest rated in their section. And then sometimes that stays more consistent, and sometimes there are more upsets. We'll
Totally.
see what happens this time. So we did see Nico Chasin, for instance, move from board 4 to board 3 after that. It was a third round. There was an upset before that, right?
There was the draw, I think. The 1800 pulling a draw against the 2500. A good result for them.
Oh yeah, that was on the K-9 one, right? Devin Park against Julia Miyasaka, excuse me. Yeah, that was an interesting game too. I want to check that one out a little bit more later too. See what was happening in more detail. Oops, so just refresh this.
Okay, there we go. Wonderful. Oh, fresh games ready to start. Now, at this point, Sean, you know, we've had these winners that have been climbing the ranks here. We're in the final round of the day. How high is the pressure for these players?
You know, I think that people deal with pressure differently, of course. I think that for me, sometimes I've been in different seeds. If we're talking about people that are kind of more on the higher end, I think some people feel more pressure almost at the beginning, if that makes sense. It's like you're playing these people that you're expected to beat. You want to make it to the end, to be in the running, to really like compete for first place. But it's not easy to get through all these people. Even if an individual matchup you're expected to win, let's say 3 out of 4 times, or even 5 out of 6 times, right? But you're playing, 8 games, right? So like, you're trying to get through, these rounds against these people that are, sometimes way underrated. Sometimes the rating gap doesn't reflect the strength gap, sometimes. And it's just, for me, it was always easier to kind of bring my A game if I was playing a strong opponent. And so I think that, there's probably a mix of that. And then probably there's also people that are just getting tired right now too, though, right? Like maybe a little less about the pressure, but definitely, you're thinking hard. We were having some conversations recently about this too. Like, is it more draining to play one 6-hour game or to play 4 1-hour games or something like that, right? And in
Huh.
some ways, it's sometimes maybe more draining to play 4 quicker ones like that because like it's such concentrated energy in these bursts. You have breaks, but they're not huge breaks, right? So you're still kind of not fully relaxed. So definitely, people could be feeling a little tired too. We have some games coming up here.
Yep, the game should be in now.
Yeah,
I'll give one quick insight on that real quick as another tournament player. One thing that I do personally that I think helps for myself, it won't work for everybody. Whenever I go into a match, I will take in consideration what type of result I need, but when it comes to my opponent, I always just assume that they're about 100 to 200 points stronger than me. That way, like how Sean said, sometimes when you play somebody like drastically lower than you, you'll play down to their rating, and then
mhm,
but if I always assume I'm playing somebody that's rated like 2400, it's like it's somebody that on a good day I can get a good result against, but I just have to play my best chess. And then it also allows me to not assume that they're just going to make mistakes.
Totally. Really quick last question about that. How often do you see high-rated players who are playing lower-rated players kind of play a kind of a lower rating kind of strategy, a low rated game, and make a blunder because they weren't playing their best chess?
Exactly. Like, yeah, you might just put yourself into. Like, if you play down to your opponent, then you're just setting yourself up. You should always be trying to play to beat somebody better than you, even when it comes to other things too, like learning. If you could beat somebody that's stronger than you, then you could beat somebody that's weaker than you. So why change up your game?
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. That's awesome.
yeah.
So we do have a bunch of games in now.
Oh man, and they are off to the races. Look at that.
As we can see, some of the ratings, there's still a gap. There's about 400 to 200 range now, like 200 to 400 range. So this is where we're starting to see they just keep clustering closer and closer. And at least
And I'm seeing quite the gap here in the K-9 section. The fourth board here, Gus Huston and William Wu.
so this is where like yeah, that's still quite a hefty gap, but I think last round it was even higher, where it's like 2400s versus 18. So
That's right. Yes, you're absolutely right.
I could bring up the K-9 section real quick. So far, all these games look like just, I mean, come out off to the races. The second board in the K-9 section, they just sped right through the opening. Like they're now into like a late mid game there. Like all the other games look like they're kind of in like a nice middle game setup where it's still kind of early to see exactly what everybody's thinking. Some interesting off balances, such as like the fourth board up on the screen, the bottom right. But man, this second game, they definitely are like
Yeah.
They're going for blood.
they're going to see if the other person's good at in games or not.
Yeah. Sometimes you do just go into one of those lines that you both know fairly well. I think the Grunfeld in particular might have a lot of forcing lines, and some do go into the end game. This is another very sharp opening.
I will say on that point is actually one of the reasons I stopped playing the Grunfeld was just how quickly it would get to the end games. I felt like I missed out on some of the fun theatrics in the middle
Yeah.
game, because a lot of the fun theatrics in the middle game with the Grunfeld, it's more or less known, because if you don't know it, you're just always going to get smashed with either side of the Grunfeld you play.
Yeah, it's definitely a dangerous one.
That
Now,
was
question.
sorry.
Sorry, if you know the line really well, but you're not looking to rush through that kind of mid-game section because you feel like you could establish something, would you try to slow the game down? Would you try to deceive kind of the regular pattern?
There are definitely times where you'll do something like a novelty or something like that, but in specific lines, something as sharp as the Grunfeld, I feel there's less room, because there's less room for error, because it's a very like sharp double-edged sword of a attack. Like if black doesn't play aggressive enough in the center, they're just going to get overwhelmed with pawns. So they need to get some sort of counter play going, like ASAP against the pawn structure that white has.
Totally, totally.
So now I play. I've added what's known as a Nimzo to my repertoire, which tends to be, I feel, a lot of times a lot of middle game, but definitely complex and closed up middle games. Not as sharp as the Grunfeld a lot of times. Definitely, it's a lot of tactics to be had. The rest of these games are still, they're looking quite open, so it's kind of cool. Like, all these players right now are playing as though they are going to win. So that's the nice thing with like Swiss tournaments and stuff. Sure, like there's a big rating difference here, but these 2000s again are they're probably underrated since they're scholastic. They might be up on their like a rising trend.
Yeah, definitely.
And you said about you can kind of assume like 300 points more than what's shown.
Some of them could be definitely. It really depends on how active they are. Sean had mentioned earlier in the stream, but a year of no over the board, like that probably stunted some of the younger players. Like the higher players, who probably were a little more established with their rating. But then younger players, like they might not have been really able to climb it as much as if they were playing over the board. Especially like I know when I played scholastically, at least one tournament a month was guaranteed. It's just a very, very constant stream of tournaments at that age.
Definitely.
Well, like there's still tournaments a lot to be had when you get to adulthood, but a lot of times there'll be like smaller things they call like a quad, where you're only play it's 4 people in it and you just play like a round robin. While as a Scholastic, there's constant Swiss tournaments, like these big 5 to 6 round tournaments, or like this one, an 8-round one.
One thing that I think used to be a little bit different when we were a bit younger and when it wasn't online is that at least there was a reputation that New Jersey or New York players or places where there was more of a chess scene where you could, like John was saying, play a tournament any weekend you want, basically. Like if you're living in New York, right? Like, there was the Manhattan Chess Club, the Marshall, like all these other places that, like, like growing up, you could just go all the time, right? Whereas, somebody that's living in a place where there isn't a club that's as established or having as many tournaments, they might be studying all the time and have a more deflated rating compared to somebody studying an equal amount. That being said, it's not just like a rating thing, because playing in tournaments really helps you get better too, right? Because like you're playing and it's a serious game, you're more emotionally invested, so you can remember things better, and all those types of things. But definitely like the internet, right, has kind of evened the playing field in terms of you don't need to be in a chess hub like St. Louis or New York or something like that to to have access to grandmaster coaching or exciting tournaments and stuff like that, like this one.
Right. You kind of sit at home and play players from all over the world and get used to that tournament adaptability that good tournament players kind of need to have, being able to kind of switch up your game depending on who you're playing.
Yeah.
But still, I'm looking at all the 8 boards we currently have loaded. There's 4 in each section that we load up in our interface over here, and it's still really hard to find a game to focus on because these positions are all very interesting and hard to grab just by like a quick look.
I feel like I am watching all of these games at once because just when I think I found one that's very interesting, something else happens on the other side of the world, and I'm like, what's going on over there?
Hey Joe, welcome chat. We're having a lot of fun right now just covering the National Open Scholastic Championship. We're not in the championship rounds yet. I feel that's more like round 6 and beyond. That's when you start getting a real good indicator of who's battling out. But we're getting there. Yeah, it's still like so early in all of these games. Of course, like one downfalls of not having any technical issues getting this round in, it's like there's so much chess to be seen. Like in the other rounds, like if we had a slight delay getting these games into the UI, like things were starting to settle in some of them already. But the other thing too, now that we're getting closer in rating, they're probably going to start slowing down and play too.
I noticed that. Yeah, they're taking it time.
Yep, you could take the control and jump in on any of them.
I'm curious about this one over here. I don't know what's happening here. I saw them take here. I was looking at the knight hanging, but they're attacking this. They're attacking this with a fork. What's going on here? What opening was it? It was Lopez.
Sense. Yeah,
This is
Blitz
one where they might be in
fair enough.
theory, but I'm not. I don't know if you're in theory. Are you in theory here, John? You play E5 stuff.
But don't play this stuff, at least not yet.
Yeah.
I still don't know exactly what I play against Roy Lopez, but
I don't
I'm
know.
definitely not this. Not because it's bad, just because I just haven't put any work into it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, there are definitely some very theoretical lines in the Spanish game. This should be a fun one to watch. See what happens. Let's see.
For
Look at these
those
pawns
who,
over here in the K-9 section. Kevin Pan against Kieran. That's I'm liking that B5, C5, D5, E5
yeah,
formation.
definitely quite Kevin kind of just saying like I'm the higher rated person here. I have these two nice bishops aiming towards the king side, but there's a pawn chain blocking it. So why don't I just throw a lot of pawns at it and see what happens?
Yeah.
But White's
Kind of like an
bishops,
intimidation.
but White's bishops also looking to potentially
Mhm.
open up on the king side too. So there might
Definitely.
be just at some point abrupt chaos, and
Yeah.
we'll see
But
where the chips fall type of deal with a position like this.
yeah, that's a good point about the white bishops because the dark square bishop maybe is more obviously open, but with like we were saying, like John was saying, with everything opening up, like this bishop could definitely be very well placed there when the things start opening up.
So
Yeah,
this will
I'll
definitely be a game to keep our eye on,
yeah.
or for you guys keep your eyes on it.
Absolutely.
Other interesting pawn stuff happening here over with Merrick Who, playing black.
That's our
Look at
top
that
left
pawn
board.
chain. Yeah, do you see that pawn chain? G2 to C6.
It's like a flying V type of deal going on
Oh,
both sides. Just
Yeah.
White's is a little bit further along.
So a good rule of thumb with the pawn chains that you'll hear people say is that they're facing the direction that you want to play on. So like if white is got their pawn chain here, that means they have a lot more space on the queen side, right? So they can play more on the queen side. Black has this pawn chain, so they're looking to play on the king side. So in this case, it kind of goes back to one of Max's questions before about when the kings are on the same side of the board, how that affects your plan. And we were saying how like if the center is open or closed, that can make a difference. Since the center is locked here and pretty close like that, black is able to kind of expand in front of their king without as much risk to what's happening with their king. So like they're looking to basically try and checkmate white, whereas white's not really looking to checkmate black, at least not yet right now. They're looking to expand on the queen side, create weaknesses, and usually the best place to attack a pawn chain is towards the bottom of it. And then if you can kind of like create some weaknesses here, then the rest of it kind of falls.
you just answered my question. I was wondering why on earth is white developing opposite the king, but that makes sense to break up the back of the pawn chain.
Yeah. And if it does open up, like, but then this can end up being an issue. But meanwhile, black's thinking, what if they get their pawn there and the queen at h4 and threaten checkmate? And if white plays here, they can sacrifice and try and get in, or they're trying to get their knight here. I don't mean they're literally thinking that yet. Right now, they're thinking about what to do about this, right? C6 is something that happens sometimes. Sometimes white doesn't want to do that yet because sometimes they're trying to, again, like break things up around like C7, D6. But sometimes you'll see somebody push the B6 pawn and mess with the C7 and this, right? So white's got a lot of interesting options here that they can look to exploit some weak squares and create some weaknesses. Looks like that one continued a few moves.
Which I was gonna say I didn't actually see what it was, but I did like the idea of c6 because it was going to force a trade of either bishop went back and I would take, or they would take the pawn forward. And doing it this way, that gives my knight a nice square on c6. There's not really much it's attacking, unfortunately, but it does at least continue to cramp black's position on the queen side. Now black, though, is definitely going to be considering a g4 at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe
Either to
right
open,
away,
or
maybe an h5 type of deal first. I didn't see how the rook got to f6. Did we see how the rook got to f6? You'll see rook f7 a lot in like kind of King's Indian structures, which is looking like this. Although we could just scroll through real quick on that one too. All right, so we got a King's Indian. b3. Have you seen this before? I haven't really seen that before. I'm more used to like b4 would be a bayonet, right? Then there's certainly other moves like rook, knight, knight. b3 seems like the wrong spot for the pawn, unless there's like an idea that I'm missing. Like it lets the bishop out, but so does b4. And usually you want to be playing c5.
It just seems slightly passive. Not bad, just not necessarily like the most
Like they
direct.
do it right, because they ended up going here anyway, and I don't see why they wouldn't have gone there right away. So they did play rook f7. That's kind of what I was thinking. Normally you'd see the rook go to f7 rather than f6. That kind of, it's a really, I always thought this was kind of a cool move. The first time I saw it, I was like, what is going on with that? It looks kind of weird. But you're letting the bishop come back here to help protect here. You're getting ready to swing the rook to g7 or h7 to kind of attack along the g or the h, or in some cases even supporting c7 when they start doing stuff like this to attack over here. So it's kind of a cool move, I always thought. I'm not sure what happened with that. I don't really like f7 and then f6, but I guess he's trying to protect here. Did the bishop have to be on d7 already? It's almost like it was in the way of the queen, and he got c6 with tempo, right? I'm wondering if there was a way to just kind of avoid moving that at all. Maybe that ended up wasting some tempo on the black side. So this is a normal idea to use that square there. So what did we get to after all this? So like we were saying, h5, knight h4, bring the rook to the g file. Definitely ideas that seem to make sense for black here. This is an interesting move. It's making it harder for black to play g4, right? Because the knight's hanging. It's almost tempting just to sacrifice and play g4. I don't think we're there yet. Are we there yet?
Well, Sean, actually kind of feeds into a question that I've been asking myself here. How devastating is it for black with how kind of blocked up the center is getting that they're down a knight? But you're saying that maybe a knight sacrifice here might not be the worst thing, because perhaps are we expecting the game to kind of open up more in the center?
Yeah, so like they're not doing anything yet, right? But you're saying if they sacrifice, like yeah, I think that like for black they'd be wanting to do that more if the center stays closed and if they can kind of quickly checkmate white, right? So like the idea behind something like this, I'm not saying this is good, but the idea would be to open up the king. If the king or the queen takes, either way, something like g4, you're immediately threatening to take and pin the queen to the king, or to do a discover to check if it's the king there. And then really like it would be hoping for a checkmate, where if the checkmate doesn't work, then probably black will then lose, right? So this would be very like a committal move. It's a big commitment to do something like that. Whereas it would be nice to be able to play g4 without sacrificing your knight.
Totally.
Like that. So I'm like looking to see, can like they put the queen or the bishop on one of these squares to protect the knight and then do it. But right now, this annoying knight here for black is making that more difficult. But really, I'd be looking at all sorts of sacrifices here, but not saying that means that they are ready yet. Yes, that is not what happened. What happened was bishop g7. Maybe the idea was to go there to try and get g4. White did just take, which opens up the rook, but it also makes it harder. Makes it so that black can't play g4 and try and open up this way, right? So the rook's open, but they're not, they're not taking on h3 with the pawn and bishop, let's say, which could be even more devastating way to open up the rook. Yeah, at this point, it seems like black's attack has fizzled maybe a little bit. I mean, they still have pressure.
Yeah, and they'll have that strong anchor, but this is where that knight actually is kind of working out on c6. Again, it's not doing too much other than just being a really annoying anchor. So now the way we're looking at this position is that dark square bishop doesn't have too much of a future unless there's probably some sack at some point. So
Yeah.
we do have a viewer game. Unfortunately, they did just lose, so I was able to bring it up though, so we could go take a peek. It's
Cool.
on the third board over here, still in the K-9 section. Actually, we'll zoom out. We could put it onto, yeah, on an examination board, and then I'll hop to like another section so we could just kind of see what else is going on. Brush that. Right, here we go.
This was the viewer one that we're going
Yep,
through.
so viewer is playing black here.
Okay.
Not a fan of an early f6. Usually,
Yeah.
like, unless you have a good reason to play f6, it's a very committal move that just creates a hole around your king.
Yeah.
So,
you go.
All right, so yeah, we could continue going along. See.
I was just gonna say for anybody that was not aware, like sometimes people call it F pawn forbidden Freddy, and just like as a quick illustration, if you're not sure why that is, D6 opens up the king too, right? But you have a knight, a bishop, a queen, all these pieces that can block on D7 or C6, whereas this diagonal is quite weak because no other pieces can block just because of the pawn.
And we can't castle kingside.
Exactly. Yeah. So a few reasons.
White offering up a wing pawn to trade off pieces for the center pawn kind of makes sense, but yeah, black did have that nice in between.
Yeah, it was a nice move. Taking first with check.
Although giving the bishop back right away and the pawn, not horrible, but I do see white being able to really fix black's pawns with and they do it, yeah.
Yeah, got some weak squares there.
Yeah, so I'm guessing this knight's game plan is, like, it seems slow, but that's kind of what the position's asking for.
Yeah.
Although that pin definitely helps stop it.
Yeah, maybe the rook f to d1, that's what they did. Yeah, I was thinking that the last
one. They should probably have done that last move. So, black finally gets a castle, and now the position's not too bad. What happens on bishop take?
That looks like a piece, right?
Yeah, because discovery, and we don't have to worry about like rook back or maybe rook there. But we could honestly, even something like this, we could just say okay, and we have two pieces and a rook for the queen. Kind of like that.
Yeah.
Just eyeballing that real quickly, yeah, it looks like there's maybe a missed opportunity there. Coming in. Okay. Now you got the free piece anyway. Awesome. Yeah, the king was definitely a bold choice to defend with. I don't hate it, but it's definitely a bold choice. Yeah, black is just winning here till this next move. Yeah, unfortunately the knight can't come back to defend. So there's like go back anywhere and this knight falls. Or go this way and unfortunately checkmate.
Nice, mate. Hey Joe, sorry I didn't see that in the chat before. You were talking about after in that same game when the F pawn push that the king would be better on H8, because I would agree with that. That would have been a useful way to avoid some of this. Somebody also asked if they're allowed to leave once they finish the last round.
Yep.
And definitely yes. Hope you had fun and did well today. We'll see you tomorrow.
Same time for all the rounds tomorrow, rounds 5 through 8. Right, let's see what else we got going on in these games. Up over to K-12 real quick, since we're still in middle game for a lot of these positions, and all of them are still looking very interesting. Although hard to really understand what's going on the fourth board there.
Oh, maybe Joe, were you talking about the King's Indian game or the last game we were looking at? I just realized you might be talking about the King's Indian game. That also could have been potentially true. Which one are you looking at now, John?
I'm not focusing on any of though. Looks like we're examining the fourth one here.
Gotcha.
So black gave up the material for attack on a king, but black can't take back here. I mean, white can't take back here. Let's read the moves. Because of this unfortunate checkmate.
Cute.
Yeah, very nice.
So it looks like black got its material back. Looking pretty good. Any other viewer games? Just let us know your USCF ID and we could get it loaded up. Otherwise, I'll just browse around and check out some of the top boards that are playing right now. We're still looking at the K through 12 section. Or what? Oh, I think it was Kevin game was the one that had the interesting pawn structure.
Kevin and Vincent.
Pawn structures.
I'll pull that one up just to take a look.
Well, it was actually the other one, but maybe the game ended.
Yes.
What happened there?
What is going on in the K-12 Board 2 game? These guys are playing a very patient mid-game here.
Yeah, that's has there been a single piece traded yet? I think there has not been a single piece traded yet. Is that correct?
That's madness. I mean, I think maybe.
Yeah, I think that's looks like yeah, all 8 pawns still there, 4 minors, right? Definitely a slower moving one.
It's like a dance.
Okay, which one are we looking at?
Board 2 in the K-12. It looks like, what is that? Is that a Nimzovich? Oh, it turns into a Scotch, right? It turned into a Scotch after. Oh no, he ain't playing F3. Okay. Yeah, definitely. I'm always a fan of weird nights. I don't know. Right there quickly. Kind of.
You know my I'm a big fan of 9 on C7 or F8.
Exactly. This is interesting. King F1 instead of blocking.
Oh, nice. Somebody in chat just beat an 1800. Feel
All
free
right,
to
very good.
drop your USCF ID and we'll toss it up on screen.
Yeah, let's take a look. Just gonna scroll kind of quickly, just curious. This one we'll come back to. Looks like we got plenty of time to come back to this one since
Yeah, haven't
nothing's
committed
traded
to
yet.
trading a piece or anything. The pawn structure kind of blew up in the other Kevin versus Kieran's game. And,
Is that game still going? It's backs only. Is that?
yeah, I just had to refresh the observer real
Gotcha,
quick.
gotcha. Oh yeah, that was the one with with the bishops on both sides, right?
The overlay on. There we go. All right. So we have looks like black just continued to steamroll their pawns and looking to open things up. White, I think, kind of got a little nervous of pawn push, so threw their bishop out onto a4 to hit the rook, but I still like to keeping it onto c2 if we could have. I guess they're trying to use that as time to get something going on the king side and not be like thrown off by a d3 push.
Mm-hmm.
Did our viewers? Oh, here we go. Viewer just dropped in their USCF. Did I ask which section? But I will take a wild guess. I think I guessed wrong. That should have been this game. All right, yeah. So this is the viewers' game. They were black in the position. And analyze through that.
Am I in the right one? The one that's on the scratch board?
Uh, Here, let me just jump all the way to the end. Yeah, that looks like it. Oh, that actually was the game we were just watching before. Where we said that white couldn't take the knight because of that.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So we actually were watching this game.
Oh, yeah, we saw a lot of this.
So nice to see that it did end up with that rook h8.
Oh, that's the line we were looking at. Yeah. Or,
Stuff.
oh, yeah, we were looking at take the knight, but similar. Yeah.
It's probably why I tried to pull up the game and said I was already observing it.
That would explain it. Let's scroll through it though, because we missed some of the beginning part. So it started off with a Petrov.
Hey, John, quick question. Before you were saying how normally you wouldn't respond knight f6. Do you feel the same way about kind of where white asserted their knight with g3 early on? Or is that a whole different kind of world there?
So I'm not sure what you mean. Can you say that one more time?
Sure. So before, and maybe this was something that was developing in that game and was specific to that instance, I'm not sure, but I believe John made a comment about how knight to f6, oftentimes you're kind of locked in making that move, that it's very limiting, and you know, you're kind of locked into kind of one strategy by bringing out your knight early in that position. Would the same hold true for the knight in g3, or is this a whole another thing I'm looking at?
I'm not sure the exact context. John, do you remember when you said that?
As I say, I do remember saying pawn to f6.
Oh, sorry, I missed it. My bad.
Oh yeah. That's that is different. No, that's okay. That's okay. That could be confusing. So f6 is the reason for something like that would be that it's actually blocking the knight. So actually f6 is a great square for the knight in general because it's hitting both of these center squares here. So one thing, just a trick that kind of new players always fall into, and then they learn, and then they stop falling into it, is that after something like this, when white takes, you don't want to take back this pawn right away. Because then there are tricks where the queen lines up this way, hitting the knight or something like this, right? But this is definitely a great opening for black. I think Fabiano Caruana is known for playing it a lot. Certainly other people are as well. John, I don't somehow. Sorry, I lost your name.
You cleared it out.
I'm sorry.
We no longer had it up. Which section was this in again?
I think it was K-9.
Yeah, K-9. Bring it back up.
Oops.
Nope. Doesn't look like it was K-9.
Sorry, I think it was K-12. Oh, here's that King's Indian game. I'm interested in what's happening here too.
Alright, so yep, we got it back up.
Got back up? Okay, sweet. I will try not to do that again. Okay, so at the moment,
Playing a Severin Gambit. I'm guessing we have a Frozen fan in the crowd.
yeah, so a lot of times if you're giving up a pawn, it's so you can have active pieces and attack quickly, right? Sometimes you have a better center. White, it looks like, has a pretty good center here. I like, this is very tricky, right? Black's threatening queen f2. White can't castle without the h2 pawn, right? When stuff takes here, there is bishop takes, hitting the queen. Now white still can't take the bishop because of the f2 pawn.
They're getting wild.
This is pretty wild. So maybe I'm a little slow here. What happens after taking the bishop here if they do instead of e5?
I'm not sure.
Looks, I'm curious if the viewer in the chat could tell us what they were planning, and probably they had something ready to go. They really went after the queen here as white before doing it. They did take anyway. It's a nice move, hitting the
Oh, thanks for the follow.
in bishop. Pretty wild game. I'm enjoying it. I like Black's position here. We got the queen lined up with the king. We got the pawns. We've talked a bit in this stream already a bunch about kings on opposite sides helping us pawn storm. We also talked about how if there's a pawn that's been pushed, that gives a hook to kind of open up the rook on if they try to ignore us.
So fair enough to Bapit in chat who said it's all prep and really dubious. But honestly though, sometimes with these faster time controls like 25-5, if you're well prepped, even if it is dubious and your opponent isn't, you're like you could really grind somebody out with result.
Definitely. Man, this is wild.
I did see this earlier, and I was wondering, like, oh, this is looking pretty good for white. So I'm curious to see.
Is it though? Because like the queen's attacked, and even after all this, the rook takes back, hitting the queen, hitting rook d1 check. The queen's lined up with this king. I don't know what's
definitely not safe, but
I like this opening, dubious or not. This looks fun.
So this though is that was a nice move.
Is there anything like knight either? No, because the bishop just blocks, right?
Yeah, but knight, you get your piece back. He can't take you.
Yeah, I like this better. Very nice.
I don't think they could actually get out of mate at that point.
After knight f3?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's too many mate threats.
Yeah, I don't think so. It could play like,
Nope.
Looking for even a queen sacrifice.
And rook h8 are both.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking, what about queen h4? I mean, not that that would be good anyway to lose it, but
knight takes and mate next move.
Although it is check, so I guess it delays it slightly.
So let's see. We have another one from chat. I'll toss that up. We could while we wait. Somebody just resigned. Yeah, and the fourth board that's currently on the screen.
K-9 section?
Yeah, the K-9 section. Looks like oh, yeah, that'll do it. The forked the king and rook, picked up the rook, and the queen's gonna beat the rook, especially with these pawns, not the queen themselves.
Also just noticing on the K9, the board one there, that it did seem like Black's attack was fizzling, and they still tried to line up all their rooks and queens on the G file, but they're no longer there anymore. So I don't know exactly what happens, but it seemed like now they're kind of stuck behind the A pawn, not really in a position to take it because of discoveries with the queen. So really an interesting position there. All right, so what viewer game do we have?
I think I have it loaded up. Let me just make sure. Okay, it looks like it's a game of progress. This one over here, we have an unrated versus 2100. And bishop's the opposite color. I think black's king's probably slightly safer. Because there's a lot of loose squares around the king, but it might be hard for black to get their pieces in. But just a quick look at it, I definitely probably prefer black's position here. Question is just kind of how do we break open white's position.
Yeah, quick look. I like black's position too, just because the dark squares near the king seem more accessible than the light squares near black's king. I don't know if that's the main point or if there are other important factors more important than that.
I just feel like black has the higher chance to being able to sacrifice a rook for like a bishop, say, to open things up than white does here.
Yeah.
Not that we should be looking to sacrifice the exchange, but if that's what the position calls for, black at least has a situation where it could be feasible.
Yeah.
The only issue that black really has is just their D pawn.
Yeah. Kind of blocking them up, making that queen very limited.
And it could be a target because black needs to protect their D pawn with pieces instead of with like they can't play say an E6 because white would gladly take and open up their heavy pieces
Everything.
on the
They'd open up
F7
everything.
Yeah.
Bishop's open, queen and rook open. Yeah, e6 would be a dream move for white. So that d5 pawn is definitely a potential target. On the other hand, for the light square bishop to move, for the rook to attack it, then the c2 pawn gets into trouble. If the c2 pawn moves, the b3 pawn gets into trouble. So how do they make progress here? I wonder what they're going to go for.
Another novice question here is there something to be said in black's position about kind of their accessibility into well, actually, now that I'm looking at it, I'm not sure if I'm even seeing the right thing here, but black looks more poised to eventually kind of break up the pawn structure that white does have, and white seems less poised to do that. Is that something to be taken into account, or am I kind of making things up in my head here?
Nope, you pretty spot on, and we're actually just seeing that now. Black drew up the h5 pawn. One of the benefits of bringing a rook back is it could come to this h file, and now white gave up the pawn, but for a good reason. They should be able to pick it back up at some point. And like, yeah, I definitely have to say I prefer black's position here, even though they're now down a pawn.
You know, it's great learning from you guys, because when we're approaching this scenario here, I really wasn't sure how to kind of like determine which side had the advantage. But now that, you know, seeing it through that lens, that analysis, yes, my novice sentiment agrees with you. I see black's position. That's the side of the board I'd want to be on too.
Yeah.
I think one of the issues for white, g4 was definitely very committal, and then rook c1, not a bad move, but just I felt the position called for more here. Okay, so now they're giving back the pawn, but I think that might be a little not the way to do it. Because what black just did, now they have the battery on. Let's pull up. These two rooks are now threatening to just crash through. White has probably the only move to at least tie down that attack. But still, I gotta say I would prefer playing black in this position. If there's any other interesting games going on. Oh boy. So this is a fun game over here. 2400 just made the right move, but it was more they were down to 20 seconds when they played this. I mean, unfortunately they can't even take the rook here because of back rank.
Yeah.
This is like, it looks like white should just be coming through, but due to weak back square, the back rank mate,
Can't take the rook, can't do queen e5, take c3 because of the same issue. I mean, they could check, but they can't take c3.
Sure. Ooh. So black went back here, but I'm actually curious if they could have, if they wanted to try to play for a win, if they could have won.
Queen h8, queen e5 would force a draw, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
But here, I'll have to think that, yeah, with white's time trouble, this pawn and this back rank mate, it looks like we're just going to repeat the position.
Well, good job to the player with the black pieces. Nice draw upset, 400 points.
Yep. So
Not bad at all.
good result.
What about the
there.
game right next to that, the board one over there? That kid game, somehow white got up the exchange, but it still does not look particularly easy. still a kind of interesting pawn structure.
I'm curious how that happened.
E2.
We could just hop into the middle somewhere. So it probably try to deal with those annoying knights of some sort.
Yeah, this is around when we left it, and I was thinking they're probably going to double up on the G or triple up, but like, I don't see any sacrifices on H3. I don't see any way for black to crash through.
I'm actually blown away because I was expecting kind of that center beam of pawns to be obliterated in a heartbeat, but it still stands.
Yeah, it's one solid closed center there.
Whew.
Now white had these pawns. I was actually thinking I was starting to like white's position better, although I wasn't sure. And as a King's Indian player, I can't help but kind of root for black here for it to be like this instructive game that I can copy later and try and use, you know? But okay, knight to D6 was. Wait, I'm sorry, what happened?
The
Right, so I was looking for
discovery.
those types of ideas. I was thinking black couldn't take on A6 because of some of these discoveries. Okay, he had the knight F5 check on top of it. Nice.
Looks like just missed the discovery. Oh, thanks for the follow, Titan. Hope you're having a good day. We're continuing coverage of the National Online Scholastic Championship. This is the first qualifier event. That's for the K through 12, K through 9 group. 2 weeks will be the K through 6, and I think K through 3 is the other. Sounds something like that.
So it's an interesting one. This guy Mariku plays all the openings I love. Plays the dragon, plays the King's Indian.
Not a student of yours, is he, Sean?
He's not. He could be my teacher. He's higher rated than me. I gotta study his games.
Yes, Titan. If you're curious, we've been doing viewer games. So if you drop your USCF and section, we could put it up on stream and go over it. Otherwise, we're just commentating games as they're coming in, and just hopping between mostly the top boards until people start doing some requests. So what is going on with this Kieran versus Kevin game? Because Kevin, his king is sailing. USCF.
Sure is.
I could probably look on the chart for you.
It's interesting though, because like if white's attack fails, even though like his king is like way out in the open, like black does have attacking chances pretty quickly if they get a couple moves. They do need to get a couple moves without getting into trouble with their king on F6. But like, yeah, rook H8 would trap the queen if it wasn't for the G7 square, right? But like, even if like rook H8, queen G7, king E6, like rook 8 at G8 is almost trapping the queen too, right? I don't know if it's quite there yet because knight takes bishop check, pawn takes, and the queen could take on D4. The queen was on G7. But it doesn't seem like so straightforward to me.
Let's see, we have just quick piece count.
Well, the queen D2, it kind of protects the bishop, also attacking F2.
Well, as I said, I had to take care of F7 first. Yeah, white had played. There was a couple moves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, white had played knight D6, threatening queen takes F7 mate. So rook G7,
Gotcha, yeah.
nice in between, and then yeah, after the queen comes in, this is gonna be black's turn to throwing back. I just feel black's pieces, although the king's on F6, kind of wild. I love it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it looks
can
good.
toss in a knight E8 check right now. I have a rook for the two minors.
So it would be takes.
Oh wait, no, what am I
there's still
thinking?
a queen,
We can't
though.
take back, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's still
jeez.
a queen.
So we have another commentator game in Austin versus Lang. It's the K-9 section, the game right next to this one, actually. And at least via the final position, it looked like,
Ooh,
yeah.
nice checkmate.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how we got to this point.
Yes. Gosh.
So the viewer was playing black here, which makes sense that they would want to show a game where they win. Oh, that's a cute idea. I'll have to add this because I played some of these sort of things. The idea being queen takes, we take this back. We don't have to worry about say that because we just bring a rook over. I like it.
Kind of hanging the bishop there as bait for the queen.
Yeah.
Yep. And the bishop's going to later also help probably at some point with a f4 push.
Seems like it was a trap avoided.
The black's king crosses over into safety. White still needs to decide what they're doing with their king. Okay. That I felt was a pretty bold move with the open d file. So now the bishop is just mentioned, helping support that. When the bishop's coming, I like black's bishops here. Like there's no light squared bishop to really give it problems. So now white realizing that on the king's side they really don't have enough to come back defend. Their only real shot is probably something like this, try to counterattack on queen's side. Mate and one avoided. Good there. That is, man, white is really.
I was about to ask you guys, like, whoa.
Uh-oh. Yep, I can see how he gets made in two here. That'll do it. Nice finish.
Yep. Oh,
Very nice.
absolutely. Choke. Ugh. Hate to see it happen, but you also love to see it happen.
Well, the
Depends
nice
on
thing too,
which side of the board you're sitting on.
say just something else happened. That is the other threat that was on the board. So nice finish.
Yeah, very nice. John, did Marikou resign in that board one? I think the clocks are stopped, but I don't know if it just needs to be updated.
Oh, yep. Marikou resigned.
Yeah,
the
makes sense.
rook is coming in. There's no defense there anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
So Austin was saying if his opponent had played g3, there's no real counterplay. Yeah, I'm sure there's a couple moves that white could have probably done a little bit better in that position. I don't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, nice finish. And that's kind of the type of games we expect at this quicker time control. 25-5, it's sometimes just aggression really pays off. And I did like that idea, the bishop h6, the later push f4 pawn. I'm definitely gonna have to look to add that into my repertoire.
Yeah.
As a novice new to tournaments, I'm just amazed at seeing how different the games are round to round to round to round. The games in this round are unlike things we saw earlier today.
Okay, so in that Kevin game, things are just getting really, really tough for white here. Like, it's kind of at this point, like, where's that final check for checkmate? Yep, that's a good question. Where is white going to put the rook? Because that's the last defender on this e4 pawn here. And once that drops, just say something. It's kind of hard to avoid checkmate here.
Yeah.
So I won't be surprised if we have a result really quickly on this board.
Yeah, it looks like it.
So Black's King went sailing, which in that regard, we do have Twitch emotes on the way, and it is going to be we sail. Pretty much like in-house commentating here whenever a king more or less gets to the 6th or 3rd rank, depending on which side. We just like to say that they're off sailing the high seas.
I love that.
Yep.
We've had a few of those.
Karen resigns, which is a result in that position.
Yeah, cool game.
Yeah. I like how all the pieces are just like Black I only need these 3 files.
Yeah.
E, F, and G. You could have the rest of the files.
No.
I think that's it for the games that we were looking for in the K-9. There's still 3 up in this board. The only one is the 3rd board. Kevin had resigned in that game. Understandably so. There's no stopping mate in that position. Because there's this mate as well as this mate.
Oh my
My
goodness.
screen
look at that.
wrong,
Yeah.
John. It's showing that board 1 in K-12 is somebody's timeout. Did that happen?
Oh,
But it's like kind of in the middle game, so it doesn't seem like that's real.
here, let me just refresh the overlay. There we go. That time still seems off. Alright, okay. Time's correct now. Just had to do a quick little refresh.
Cool.
Yeah, they have plenty of time and still a somewhat complex position over there.
What is going on in board 2 here in the K-12 section? This was the kind of the Cold War standoff we were looking at earlier, where no pieces had been taken by the mid-game.
Sure, Aiden. I'll get your game in. I have perfect timing. I was looking for some games to go over in the K through 9 section, as the ones we had up on screen were pretty much coming to an end. Could just toss you out to board 1. Alright, so Austin was playing Black in this game. Spoiler alert, it looks like they mated with 2 queens. We have another, as before, the A65 stuff. Is that?
I don't know how to respond to the chat stuff, but we should get rid of something.
You could just like, yeah, delete that pretty. It's easier in the other UI. I don't know why they make it so hard to do it in like the manager view, but
Thank you.
all right. Thanks for the call out on that. We'll just pretend like that never happened, and we'll go back to checking out Aiden's game. Okay, they're just gonna be. If you don't mind, just going through that game real quick.
Yeah.
Feel free to do some commentary.
All right, so what do we got here? This is a Nightorf. We've seen a few Nightorfs so far. So this is one that's come up before, right? To stop the b4 push, attacking the guard of the e4 pawn, right? Once again, white's looking for chances to play knight d5, but preferably in a way where they don't have to take back with their pawn. And that doesn't look so easy right now. So instead of going for there, going for knight to g5. This is interesting. Now the d5 square might be easier to get without having to take back with the pawn in some cases, but on the other hand, black has this open b file coming in here, and this knight isn't attacking too much at the moment. It does allow f4 though, which is what happened. This is an interesting position, definitely another sharp one here. The rook does take the open b file, hitting b2. Now, like we mentioned, whenever the c pawn and the e pawn have moved, then this pawn becomes a target, right? And so unlike in the situation we saw earlier, where a knight went to d5 and there was a trade and white wasn't able to attack the d pawn, maybe in this case it is a little bit more of a real target. On the other hand, this open b file, as we keep coming back to, looks quite dangerous. What does white do here? Like knight a4, attack the queen and protect it? Do they have any choice besides that? If they push the pawn, they take. Of course, b4 still en passant taking. Not really any choices, probably, right? No knight d1 to protect it. Seems pretty dangerous. Now black is hitting the knight and this pawn. So if white goes back to save it, and then, you know, they gotta be somewhat careful, like about if there are trades where then at the end of it, it could be some potential skewers too. Definitely a sharp position, so he can't really take it, but he can go here, and now knight a4, they could go back, but it's no longer protecting the pawn and attacking the queen with tempo, right? This would just be protecting it, which would mean that maybe black could think to do something like knight to c5 and try and distract the knight away from the b2 pawn. So white decides not to go into that, but that means that black can come in immediately, or they don't even need to come in immediately because there's still nothing white can do about that. Huh.
Some quick
I thought
shout
black
out
was
to Jason. He's 4 for 4 right now.
All right, Jason,
Nice,
congrats.
Jason.
That's what I like to hear.
That's
All
awesome.
right. Must have a pretty good coach.
Actually, I have the same coach as him now.
Grandmaster Mac.
Yes, you could see the standings via grid.
I like that knight c5 before taking touch. I'm a fan of that.
Nice, Aiden. Aiden, the person game we're going through right now is wow, I can't spell real quick. They are 3 and 4 as well. Nice.
Very nice. Yeah, pretty cool
when it
game.
comes to cheating, they'll all be taken care of via. We had mentioned earlier in stream about how the fair play will work. So the results of this tournament won't actually be until about 2 to 3 weeks before everything is finalized, just to make sure that there was no suspicious play.
What a wild position. Got knights pinned, they're attacking the rook, got a lot to deal with here for white. I like that move.
It will be both king, like if things do trigger now, but there's going to be like a more in-depth 2 to 3 week analyzing of everything to make sure that it's all above board.
Nice touch there, trading the queen for the rook. Bishop can't stop the pawn. There are other ways to finish, but I like that choice. Kind of just very forcing, looks good, no chances. And then the rest should be more straightforward. Black just needs to avoid any stalemates, but with the bishop, that's even easier to avoid. So that is a nice win. Very nice.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I like the whole thing, but I liked especially kind of some of that when attacking b2, not going for it right away, dancing around a little bit, getting the queen to b7, as well as that knight c5 before taking on b2. Very cool. Nice game.
I love that cheeky trade of the queen for the pawn down at the end of the file. That was great.
Yeah.
There's still a couple games being played. One's getting down to the wire. This one, like about 20 seconds left for both players. Oh wow. Same with the first board in this section. So we have 2 games down to the wire. So let's top back out into the big thing. One, it's 10 versus 12 seconds. Although that should be straightforward of a
Yeah,
win
the Queen
there.
to the Knight should be more straightforward.
And then the other one's a little tricky, but once the king gets to the safe square, should be able to pick up the bishop, and that should just about do it.
Yeah.
We're probably approaching the end of it when it comes to a live game. So again, if there's anybody that wants to go over their game, feel free to just drop your USCF ID in chat and which section you're playing in, and you can pick it up from there. As I'll check the grids to see if there's still any games going on. Okay, there's only 2 still being played in 8 through 9.
Yeah, definitely when you're ahead, trading down to simplify. Reading the chat, took a lot of games to realize you could trade down to eliminate counterplay. Definitely a good strategy when you are ahead, right? Avoiding complications.
Sometimes the computer might yaunt you because you'll like miss a +12 to have a +8, but it's much more easier as a human to just finish with less stuff on it. So I just like, get out of here, Stockfish. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, there's a couple other games still going in the 8 through 12, so we'll get them up too. But we're definitely coming down to the wire on people still playing, which makes sense with the time control and the start times. Don't tell me I just found that game just for it to be over. Let's try this one.
Max Lou just won, but
We have welcome Mewtwo, everybody else in chat. Thanks for sticking around. Alright, yeah. I'm trying to get these games in and they're just ending so quickly. We're like at that point of the tournament. And it looks like it's mostly just time scrambles and the person with the advantage just making sure they win. Although that should be a draw right there. Yep. Fourth board is the last one in this section. Are there any other active clocks in the other section? Nope, doesn't look like it. So I think this is one, the last game's being played. Actually, it is the last game being played, so might as well. Oh, never mind.
is that it?
Yeah, so
fair enough.
All results for today are in. Definitely a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah.
Nice on 4 out of 4.
Very nice. Good job, everybody.
We did look at one of Lammy's games earlier today, and that was a fun one. I forget what their USCF is, their ID is, so I can't just pull up their latest game. But if anybody wants a quick shout out on their game, we'll do that. Otherwise, we'll probably start packing it up for the night. And there is a couple other things I have planned for tomorrow's stream. Like, we were fortunate enough to get the Chief Operating Officer of ICC on for an interview, so I'll put that up. And one of the concerns in it that we do go over is fair play and how ICC will go about doing that. So very, very relevant to the latest conversation in chat. We're going to hold any of our own opinions out of it, since A, we didn't see the games, and B, it's sometimes somebody might just have a good game, or other times that, yeah, we like to give the benefit of the doubt, and we'll let technology and any sort of detection solve the issue for us. So one last shout out for anybody to watch a game. Otherwise, oh, thanks for the bits. Nice.
Thank you very much.
Right in at the buzzer.
Appreciate it.
And this was definitely a lot of fun. Once again, I want to thank Max for joining us today, Sean and myself, as we're covering probably the biggest U.S. Scholastic event of the year. Normally, this would be the time where we would have the Super Nationals, but with quarantine and everything, this is a spiritual version of it this year. 4 more years, the other one we should be back to overboard by then, so looking forward to it.
I want to quickly thank you both and thank all of our players today for teaching me and all the parents and so much. Today was such amazing learning as a chess lover. I couldn't have asked for a more exciting day. So this was unbelievable. Thank you guys for having me again, and I hope to see you guys a little bit more tomorrow. It's going to be a really fun time.
Yeah, thanks, Mac. Asked great questions. And thank you, everybody, for participating in the chat. All the great games.
Joe in chat just threw out Max being the sharpest dresser of the bunch, as Sean and I are just rocking our Garden State Passer hoodies.
Thank you.
So once again, thanks everybody for stopping by, and we'll see you all tomorrow.